and we are calling today's short podcast Catholics Rescuing in North Carolina. Today, I'm happy to be joined with my friend Logan Reed. Logan, thanks for joining us today.
Father Nix, it's an honor and a privilege. Thank you for having me.
Yeah, I got to meet you in real life at your wedding, actually, in North Carolina, to a regular on this podcast, Captain Emily Rainey, and it was a great honor to be at your wedding. Such a beautiful, growing family that you have. Let me just give a quick intro to Logan, a little CV for him. Logan Reed is a 34-year-old traditional Catholic, devoted husband to Emily Grace, and proud stepfather to their son Elijah. A U.S. Army veteran, Logan now works in project management, but finds his true passion as president of the Martyrs Walk. This Catholic men's brotherhood hosts military-style retreats to help men embrace their God-given vocations and lead with virtuous masculinity in a world increasingly hostile to the foundations of family life and authentic male leadership. The Martyrs Walk is dedicated to equipping men to stand firm as protectors, providers, and spiritual leaders with their families. We're going to talk a little bit about Martyrs Walk towards the end, but today on this podcast, we are talking about what happened in North Carolina with the storm, what people are doing to help fix, rescue, and recover. And before we get into the stats, I just want our listeners to understand that we live in a very fast news cycle. There is going to be months of fixing roads. There's still thousands of people stranded, and we have Catholics helping out there. Again, the name of this little interview, we're just going to go for about 30 minutes. Catholics rescuing in North Carolina. So I want to hit the bad news and then the good news. Logan, what is happening out there in the state that you live in? You lived in there even before the hurricane hit. What's the bad news on the ground in North Carolina?
Yeah, so, well, first, for starters, this Hurricane Helene was the deadliest hurricane that's hit the U.S. since the 2017 Hurricane Maria that hit Puerto Rico, absolutely devastated the island. We're looking at over $200 billion in property and infrastructure damage, which makes this the costliest hurricane or storm in U.S. history. When you look at the trajectory, this started on the 26th of September, and it started as a Cat 2, hit the panhandle of Florida. By the end of that day, it was already at Cat 4, made its way up, and impacted Florida, Tennessee, South Carolina, North Carolina, parts of Virginia, and absolutely decimated Appalachia. So Western North Carolina, that's where we've been focusing. The death count, it's hard to get a firm number. The authorities are still saying it's they're still tracking a number of individuals who are lost. 230 was the death count, the last I've heard, from an official number perspective, but I see that going up well beyond that. I don't know if we're going to get into Hurricane Katrina numbers, but it's going to be close. When you think about the sheer devastation in the area, 40 trillion gallons of water dumped in the southeast of the United States. And to put it in perspective, so for those not in the U.S., that's 151 trillion liters of water. That's enough water to fill the Eiffel Tower 145,000 times. So just to put it in perspective, this was the perfect storm, if you can say that. There was a small tropical storm that entered Appalachia a few days prior to, so it saturated the ground, it saturated the topography, the mountainous terrain. So it was primed and ready for just torrential flooding. And Asheville is one of the locations that we hear most on the news, but what you don't hear a lot is the smaller valley towns, so the Hollers in Avery County, Mitchell, Yancey, and I went through them, drove through, and we were assisting the last 2 days. Absolutely decimated, and we can get more into that. But that's the bad news, I would say, summed up.
Yeah, I was listening to Sean Ryan's podcast yesterday, and I was surprised to hear him say it's going to be 2, 3, 4 months to rebuild some of these roads, even longer for the bridges. There's people without insulin, without food, without running water, without the internet, which sounds obviously less serious than the other items, but it's amazing how reliant we are on that. But the main thing is there's people without electricity, running water. We take these things for granted. There's the good friends with the Diaz family, and they sent me a text today, and it said, "Our family in Asheville continues to deal with challenges dealing with limited supplies and toxic mud when wet/dust, when dry and no running water. My cousin and her husband are troopers. Early on, they'd go look for missing friends and clean up debris by day and then protect their home, which they built themselves from squatters by night. Things seem to be getting better, but now they're driving out to surrounding towns that are worse off without," I think they meant without supplies. Hard to imagine sending supplies out of Asheville to, for example, Burnsville, and that's what's happening since the locals are taking care of each other. So what I love about today's podcast is this isn't just a news report on the bad news. Logan's group, Martyrs Walk, is boots on the ground, helping with even helicopters. You guys are, even if you don't own helicopters, you at least have access to them. And so tell us a little bit about what you've seen. I'm going to flash some pictures that you texted me onto the screen here, some of the videos without sound, so you can keep talking. But tell us what you've seen, what you provided, and what you've done.
Yeah, absolutely. So I'd say North Carolina, Appalachia got rocked very heavy the 27th, 28th of September. The next day I talked to Emily, and we were about 5 hours to the east in eastern North Carolina. Usually when you hear about natural disasters, more times than not, they're further away from your location. It's a little bit harder to get to. But we just spent our honeymoon in Western North Carolina Highlands, which got affected a little bit. It wasn't nearly as bad as the parts of Appalachia that we've been spending time in. But there's something about the mountains. There's something about Appalachians, just their way of life that I knew that not just myself, but the organization I'm a part of, the Martyrs Walk, I knew it could do some good. And, you mentioned, you gave a really great intro into who we are. And one of the needs that, I've identified, I know you've identified, Father, and our organization is, this secular modern world is in need of strong, masculine, God-fearing Catholic men of action. And that is something that I don't think Catholics in modern history have really demonstrated that we can respond to. And it doesn't have to be natural disasters, but this was one of our first kind of proof of concepts. So I immediately alerted my team, and I said, hey, we have tens of thousands of people, North Carolinians, who we have the ability to help. And so it started out with just an idea. The team rallied around. We were able to get support from local businesses here in Hampstead and in Charlotte. And our first convoy, we sent up tens of thousands of pounds of supplies that were donated. We've raised to date almost $150,000, just people in the community wanting to get involved. And
wait, your organization you started sent over 10,000 pounds of food?
Tens of thousands of supplies.
Tens of thousands. The one you started.
Yes.
Incredible.
Yeah, yep. And we've partnered with a wonderful organization. They're called Preparedness Consulting Services. They're based out of the Pole Creek Baptist Church in Candler, North Carolina, which is just west of Asheville. Candler is still without power and running water in a lot of areas, but they were less impacted. So that naturally became kind of the hub for logistical and to push supplies out. So kind of our model is we're facilitating supplies getting to this hub in Candler, and it operates in like a hub and spoke model. So from Candler, we have various spokes out to the more remote locations in North Carolina that teams funnel supplies in. When I mentioned Avery County, Mitchell, Yancey County, these counties have a lot of hollers, small valley towns, in between two mountains that were absolutely obliterated. Specifically Spruce Pine, Swannanoa, Chimney Rock, Bat Cave. So these locations, I mean, I'll try to paint a picture, and the videos and pictures will help in the background, but the sheer force and the volume of water that rushed through these valleys, it not just decimated houses, but like complete foundation would have been destroyed, come up in a lot of these locations, bridges. I've seen, steel beams wrapped around just cement concrete, kind of like a straw just wrapped around. So you think about the sheer volume and the force of water that came through, and it is. So I would say 3-4 months is probably a very loose estimate. We're looking.
It's
So
going to be longer, isn't it?
well, in those counties, Yancey, Mitchell, and Avery, for specifics, they're not looking to get power until March 2025. This is going to be a long-term effort for sure.
So forgive my ignorance. What did the damage, rivers or the actual storm in the air?
So the interesting thing is the wind velocity actually, from what I've researched, it wasn't as significant as just the torrential downpour and the amount of water that collected at high points on the mountains. What you had is when the initial rush of water came, you had a lot of debris, a lot of homes and vehicles kind of like creating dams, and then you had a continuous downpour of part of this 40 trillion gallons of water. Those areas broke, and then you had just a wall of water rushing through these towns. And the stories that just being on ground and talking to the locals, just hearing some of the experiences firsthand. I mean, it's incredibly devastating, but it just reinforces the need for a continued presence. So we're in it for the long run, and they absolutely need it.
We Americans are interesting. The whole world knows that we are the most likely to help in a difficult situation, or at least that's what we're known for, and I think it's true. But if you look at the most difficult, at least physically the most difficult religious orders like the Missionaries of Charity and the Carthusians, Americans usually get washed out of them because they're not used to the long haul of the ascetical life. And this is where I think it's important that we look at Catholics rescuing for the long haul, because as I said at the beginning of this podcast, we are in such a fast news cycle. People are probably already bored with the news in North Carolina, but Savior in Hebrew is synonymous with rescuer. And so to me, it's beautiful to see Catholic men out there rescuing, not just for the social media presence, not just to say I did something, but if these counties aren't going to have power until March of 2025, then we have to realize that there is going to be people dying slowly over the long haul without food, without electricity, without running water, without medicine. And it sounds like you guys are, I mean, you can't reach the whole state, obviously, but you're doing what you can at this point.
Right. And we're trying to be as, efficient and strategic as possible. I can't recommend that folks who want to help, load up their truck with, at least at this stage of where we are, this phase of kind of the recovery process. I can't recommend, loading up with food and water. Most locations, even the harder hit areas, those more remote hubs, they're good to go on food, water. This phase of recovery is really on surviving. And even so, now that they have enough food, enough water, and that's just right now. So we don't know what that picture looks like in 6 weeks. There might be a tremendous need for additional food and water, but right now the needs are cold weather gear. When you look at the temperatures, in Appalachia right now, we're looking at 20s and 30s in the evening. I mean, it was freezing when I was there yesterday, waking up in the morning. But that's kind of the shift of the necessity. So, this second convoy we did, generators, propane space heaters, just propane in general, blankets, and then there's those specialty medications that are in need, that are still going to be in high demand.
So people can see the GoFundMe in the show notes, both on YouTube, Apple, everything else. You can find that. What percentage of that is going to you guys at Martyrs Walk? What percentage of that is going to the needy in North Carolina?
Yeah, outside of reimbursing members who for gas, just their gas expense going up into the affected areas, 100% of the donations are going directly into the impacted areas. We're taking this next week to conduct interviews, talk to local parishes in the area, really try to find those families who who were absolutely devastated, lost everything, may or may not, likely not, didn't have insurance to cover, home repairs on their homes. But we're looking to make and in the big picture, it's still a minor difference, but it means the world to those few families that we're able to impact. And I think the messaging that that I want to convey is, this started as a group of 10 gentlemen, part of the Martyrs Walk, with an idea, and we were able to impact through a bunch of different partnerships individuals who've lost everything. And there's an evangelization aspect to it. A lot of I did visit several Catholic churches in the area, St. Lucian, in Spruce Pines, and if you look at videos and pictures of Spruce Pine, that entire area was devastated, and this beautiful 100-year-old church, it just remained in pristine condition. Like, I get chills thinking about it. I'm standing, in the chapel, speaking to one of the members of the parish, and they're very thankful. We dropped off a generator, but yeah, it's the whole experience was just very surreal.
And that's pretty impressive to have a charity give 100% to them. I mean, you have to take care of civilians filling up gas tanks, but besides that, it would be ranked quite high on the Charity Navigator. Now, if I have any listeners, men out there who wanted to join, is it even possible to come out there, get access to you guys? I mean, I'm going to highly encourage people to donate. I think that's what, excuse me, that's what people need the most. But are you taking other volunteers? Yeah.
So like I mentioned, this is going to be a longer term effort. We don't have our next trip scheduled just yet. So my recommendation would be, follow us on social media, the Martyrs Walk on Instagram, Twitter, Facebook. You can follow my personal page, Logan Reed NC, on Instagram. That's usually where I push out the most information. But we have a point of contact on ground. So for instance, if we, the Martyrs Walk, don't have a planned convoy, you can get in contact with either Polk Creek Baptist Church. They're also located on Instagram, as well as Preparedness Consulting Services. So my point of contact on the ground, his name's Curtis Ivins, former military, just amazing human. He was the one who really established this hub, and he's helping facilitate folks from out of town. They have a student center. There's still no running water, but they do have power at this location. So there's areas to bunk down. They have a bunch of cots. So if a small team of men were interested in going out to support, I would say the first approach, look on social media, see when the Martyrs Walk next convoy is. But if that doesn't work with scheduling, reach out to Polk Creek directly, and they'll be able to identify what those needs are at the time, and direct folks from that.
Great. What I'll link your GoFundMe to the Martyrs Walk, and then I'll link your personal Instagram in the show notes. Speaking of social media, this was on Facebook. Someone put up, this was from North Carolina, in the middle of all the debris and the mess. They said, "We now leave notes. We have makeshift clotheslines. We use candles and lanterns. We share food with our neighbors. We bring back messages and updates for those that haven't ventured out. We offer supplies to each other. We haul water from the creek to flush toilets. We help with what needs to get done. We collaborate and share. We survive as a family and as a community. Our phones are useless. Our access to resources aren't guaranteed. Our spirit is strong. Our willingness to work is unparalleled. Our community is unstoppable. Our ability to collaborate and share is necessary, but it's also beautiful. Our understanding of what it takes to survive is remarkable. Our amount of chainsaws per household and practical wisdom is priceless. Our hollerhood is amazing to the witness." I don't know what that means. "We can do this. We are doing this. Our history shows that we can. We are a remarkable place with amazing people. Our ability to work together is why this place is so very special." So, I think that natural disasters bring out the best and the worst in people. My brother and sister had to escape Katrina, and my brother had some pretty amazing stories about Katrina. But I also know a gentleman who got locked in the Superdome, and he saw the worst of humanity. It was like a preview of hell there. So we really do see the best and worst of humanity in crises like this. What have you seen out there as far as things that are edifying and maybe things not so edifying?
Yeah, so day 4, day 5 on ground, if you just think about the human body, we can last a while without food, but we can't last long without water. And really, when you get into that day 3, day 4, day 5, no food, that's gonna turn people sometimes very good people to do not so great things. So one of the big, I have a military background. Several members of the Martyrs Walk have military backgrounds. So, we operated kind of as a small platoon, if you will. We had, convoy briefings. We had ROE briefings, which is rules of engagement. We did go up fairly well armed, just because we weren't sure what we were walking into, and that was the recommendation for our point of contact on ground. I mean, we created a security roster in the evenings to help pull security around all the supplies. And like I said, this was day 4 or 5. Now things are getting, supplies is getting distributed. You're not seeing a whole lot of looting, at least in a lot of the areas that we were in. But that was a real concern early on.
I think most of the listeners know the answer to this, but I'm going to put it in kind of a lowbrow way. What's the problem with water if there was a storm that added too much water? Why is there missing drinking water if you guys got flooded with trillions of gallons of water?
We have to think about, what that water is mixed into. And, you mentioned, I think one of the text messages, the toxicity. I mean, that's a real problem that I don't see a lot of teams and a lot of folks in the community really placing a priority. But, in several weeks, when sickness starts to take hold, I mean, that we're really going to see the impact of, like sewage systems. I mean, you think of all of the infrastructure needed to support towns. I mean, that it's all washed away. So the water is mixed in with the sewage, which is mixed in with everything.
So it's difficult for people to imagine dehydration in a flood. Let me say that again, dehydration in a flood. But this is what you're looking at.
Yeah, I mean, and those life straws, the ways to purify water, that's definitely, that was in high demand early on. It still is going to be in high demand, as this continues.
Now, we spoke off the air. I said, is FEMA purposely eradicating people, or are they negligent? Where do you fall on that, Logan?
So I know this is a hot topic. I've seen a lot of different takes on social media, a lot of people talking about the situation on ground who haven't been on ground. Some people may or may not have been on ground. I can share from my perspective and from my experience. I can tell you that in the 6 total days that I've spent on ground in Western North Carolina, the only FEMA presence that I saw was the airdrops from the CH-47 Chinooks, and that was on day 1. We had 4 Chinooks back to back delivering FEMA MREs and FEMA water, and that was to Chandler, North Carolina. That was then further disseminated to the different areas. Outside of that, I did not see one FEMA checkpoint. I did not see one FEMA vehicle. I did not see any FEMA C2 or op centers. The thing that I really want to highlight, and I want to share with your followers and your listeners, is that this recovery effort has been, from my experience and from what I witnessed firsthand, has been almost 100% run by the locals in Appalachia. I mean, you have your fire departments working well beyond overtime. You have your state police, your local police that are definitely helping. But in terms of the hubs, so the different small businesses that weren't as affected as badly as some areas, they opened their stores to act as these spokes, to receive supplies, to distribute supplies. And again, I'm getting chills thinking about just witnessing and seeing how many different people have come together, and their lives have been completely changed as a result of this devastation. But to see them come together as one people, and to see the hugs, to see just different groups coming together in prayer, it was so impactful. And then obviously listening to the stories firsthand, just listening to firsthand accounts of the devastation that they witnessed in real time, and then the appreciation of the support and the volunteers, because I'll share this. I won't name the county, but I spoke to a fire chief, and he said, what you have to understand, I think he called me son or sir. He was an old crusty Appalachian, just an absolute stud. But he said, Not myself nor anyone in this community would allow FEMA to prevent needed supplies going to our families and to our neighbors. And if they did, they would receive a swift, and I quote, a swift Spartan kick to the chest. And I said, that's really, I mean, it's wonderful to hear. But I do, my perception is that FEMA probably understands that. There were probably some altercations at local levels that didn't make mainstream news. But that's the only explanation that I have for not seeing any FEMA vehicles, unless they, ran unmarked in SUVs.
This reminds me of what our country was built on. Small people in the original 13 colonies facing off with big GOVT. Tell me one of those stories that was inspiring to you.
Yeah. So in Chimney Rock, which you Google Chimney Rock, and there's no Chimney Rock town anymore. I mean, it was decimated. But
really,
one of the
it doesn't even exist anymore.
I mean, it's a skeleton of what was there. It's hard to describe. But one of the gentlemen that we were running supplies to, he was in that area helping, just with relief. And this was, I think, day 2 of the storm. And he said he looked down what used to be the road, the main road that ran right through Chimney Rock, and he saw this little girl, maybe 3, 4, or 5 years old, and she had a bungee cord strapped to her wrist, and dragging behind her was a 2x4, and this girl, I guess, her parents, the flood, wiped their house, and the only thing that their parents could think about doing was tying the little girl to a bungee. And I guess they also tied to the bungee and tried to attach to some beams on their house. They were washed away. They died. But the little girl, made it, and she's, just in rags, and she's walking down the road, carrying this 2x4 attached to a bungee. You have stories of different SAR teams, search and rescue teams, going out, and then that phase of the effort is pretty much wrapped up. But we're still on recovery. There's still cadaver dogs, running all throughout different areas. But you have hearing people talk about the day after, and right as things started to die down. I mean, bodies and just body parts and trees, and when you see the videos and you see these pictures, it almost looks in some areas like a nuclear bomb went off. I mean, that the force of just the amount of mass and volume, and you have to think all this water is coming down, the mountain and different valleys, but it's also picking up debris, and it's picking up trees, and it's picking up vehicles and metal and houses, and all of that is just coming down at tremendous volume and force. So yeah,
it sounds like the body count then is very conservative, and we're going to have probably, unfortunately, much higher numbers.
That's my personal opinion. It's tough because, especially when you get into the hollers and some of the remote areas, the population density it's not very population dense. You have people, houses fairly spread out. You have some houses that, even in the more devastated areas, perched up, a little bit higher, they were relatively okay. But it's going to be higher than what the current number is. What the final count, I'm not sure.
You texted me that picture of you guys either loading a helicopter, it looked like a Chinook to me, maybe not, or taking supplies out of it. How did you guys have involvement with choppers?
Yeah, so PCS, Preparedness Consulting Services at Polk Creek Baptist Church. The gentleman I mentioned earlier, Curtis Ivins, my main point of contact on the ground, kind of running that hub. He utilized his network and his military experience, and he was able to route. They constructed an HLZ in the church's ball field. So a couple of former military guys that worked for PCS went out there. They took spray paint. They cordoned off 100 by 100 meter area, and put a big H, and then they were able to direct U.S. Army assets to do drops. And it was interesting. We got there. We left from Belmont Abbey College on Thursday. So this is the Thursday after the hurricane. We convoyed up. It was about 10 vehicles, 13 men, and we arrive at Polk Creek Baptist Church. And within 5 minutes, we hear, I hear the rotors of the Chinook, and we see, the Chinook coming. And immediately I see Kurt, and he's like, "We need your team down at the HLZ to help unload." I'm like, "All right." So we all go down there, and we're running down. Some of us have full kit because we don't know what we're walking into. And we just immediately jump in. Bird lands, they drop the back, and we start running in, pulling out pallets. And it was wonderful because, there were a few men from the Martyrs Walk. We got folks, who reached out, and they haven't gone through the walk, the experience yet, but they wanted to help. So it was really, really amazing to see men, strangers early on in that day kind of form this very tight-knit bond. And they're doing that. We're forming this bond through helping and through, providing relief. I do want to call out one of the teams who came with us. They're a team from Colorado. So they drove straight through, met us at Belmont Abbey. 3 traditional Catholics. One of them, Brother Daniel, is a Third Order Franciscan. So on the second day we were there, I went out on a mission with them. Brother Daniel's in the back, and we're just driving through Swannanoa, and I mean, you look out and it's just devastation. And he's sitting in the back left seat, and he's doing his prayers. And there was some, in the midst of hearing Brother Daniel pray while we were driving through, you kind of get a glimpse at this is God's country. And it was funny. I had one of my followers send me a message, and she sent this picture, and the sun was shining at a specific angle. I think it was like a sunrise, and you still see devastation, but amongst the devastation, it's like oddly beautiful. Like you see God's creation, and then the stories and the experiences of people from all walks of life coming together to help in any way that they can. I mean, it's like an oddly beautiful thing. Still can't lose sight of the sheer devastation, but absolutely.
I wasn't going to mention this, but I put on my Telegram channel a LifeSite news article titled, and I have to watch the algorithm vocabulary, so I'm going to use code here. Majority of Catholic charity employees donate to pro-ABORTION, pro-alphabet suit candidates report, and they're reporting Lepanto Institute. Michael Hitchborn does great work with that. And LifeSite News quotes him saying, a new analysis of political campaign contributions conducted by the Lepanto Institute and complicit clergy updated and expanded this initial research to include individuals working for various other Catholic charitable institutions, namely Catholic Charities, ... So again, 83% of political contributions go to basically organizations that don't agree with Humanae Vitae. I'm not going to see a penny of what goes to Martyrs Walk. You're really not going to see it any either, unless you have to fill up some tanks, whatever. You're giving this entirely to them. So, well, I didn't mean to compare you guys to others, or at least when I hit record, but I'm going to push you guys, considering the garbage that a lot of these other Catholic charities are actually supporting. So I know you have to get back to your family, Logan, so I'm just going to finish with really encouraging any listeners to donate to the Martyrs Walk, because that money's not going to me. It's not going to you. It's going to people who've basically lost everything. Maybe tell us a little bit about the supplies that are still going to be brought by Martyrs Walk to the destitute of Appalachia, North Carolina.
Absolutely. So, and I'll send you a couple of videos of what the hub looks like right now. I mean, they have probably a 9-day supply of just, again, thousands of pounds of supplies. And that wasn't just solely donated by the Martyrs Walk. Different organizations are sending things there. But moving forward, like I mentioned, generators, propane, space heaters, cold weather gear, in-demand medication, so insulin. That's if you think about how these folks deep in the mountains are going to be surviving through the night and through the winter cold, still without power. Like I mentioned, we're looking at March 2025 until several counties are going to have power back. So the initial influx of supplies is going to hold them for a little bit, but there's going to be a time, and it's hard to kind of decipher, is it going to be 1 week? Is it going to be 3 weeks, 6 weeks? But there will be a time well before the power's on and things are, and I can't say back to normal. These areas won't be back to normal probably for 2-3 years, if ever.
I think that sounds more reasonable than 2 to 3 months. I think that sounds right. When you when you consider how rural they are, how little support they're being given by the GOVT. And maybe you guys can use that donation I sent a few days ago for Miraculous Medals on Chains. Maybe you could give those out, or I can get you guys some Miraculous Medals on Chains, one of the two of those. So Logan, I know you have to get to your family. Thank you so much for your time here, but especially thank you for being Christ's hands to the destitute, the homeless, those facing cold, lack of electricity, hunger, even possible dehydration. Not that it's my right to thank you for representing Catholics, but for I might as well say that thanks for representing Catholics out there so well.
I appreciate you, Father, and thank you for putting this on your platform and acknowledging that this is really a longer term effort. It's even though it's going to, like you mentioned, it'll be out of the news cycle for most folks.
Yeah.
Something that we're dedicated to, and we're going to see it through. And
that's where, even though I'm looking at your GoFundMe right now, it says, I mean, you were aiming for, I'm trying to find the numbers. I mean, you're almost at your goal, but there's no problem going over because you're aiming for 150,000. But if we go over that, obviously the money it's not going to go to GoFundMe. If you guys go over the 150,000, that goes to the families of North Carolina, not to GoFundMe. Is that correct?
That's correct. And what I will say is this GoFundMe is going to end on Friday, and then starting Friday, we're going to have just a general Martyrs fund.
Okay.
So that's important to decipher. So if individuals, if families are interested in supporting our Helen efforts directly, they can do so via the GoFundMe till Friday. And then very shortly after that, there will be a new link, and it's going to be just called the Martyrs Walk Fund. And that's going to allow us to do more of these type of efforts moving into the future.
So that one going up on Friday, that will help. Since this is your full-time job, I assume that's going to help you guys, right?
You got it.
Okay. Well, thanks so much for your time.
All right. God bless, Father.
God bless. Take care.
They shall never sound in slave.